Continue the 8 steps by running a successful audit with finishing. What that entails is, firstly, the evaluation form is never to leave your hand. This form over here is the evaluation form. It's called QCTO Form 5. They send it to you as an APL. It's got a few different names, but what it is the form where the requirement is on the left-hand column and the commentary is on the right-hand column, where you align the requirements to the question to the answer, which is a point in your QMS where that answer exists. The audit is to follow this form, so when the auditor arrives and until they leave, this form must be visible to you at all times. If you're doing a virtual audit, have it on a separate device or a clipboard so you don't have to close it when you present documents virtually. Just make sure it is always visible and always accessible, and you're constantly following that form during the audit, or that the auditor is doing so. So the auditor will arrive, you have your evaluation form in your hand, which will never leave your hand, and then you welcome them. You can do some refreshments if it's an on-site audit, or have some chats if it's a virtual audit, however they'd like to do their welcomes and introductions. There needs to be some record of the audits happening. Sign a physical register, have them sign your register. Just please be sure that you get some kind of evidence there and then, not we will send you an attendance register later. Have some kind of evidence that you control there and then that this audit is happening. A screenshot, a signed register, something. Do not lose control of your audit. So the auditors arrived, you had the evaluation form in your hand, you did some welcomes and introductions, and at some point the audit needs to start, but it needs to start via and according to and following this evaluation form. Stop the audit if it is becoming derailed. That means that your audit is not following this evaluation form for some reason. If that is happening, you are losing control of your audit and you need to stop the audit and find out why it is not following this evaluation form. Most auditors are quite reasonable. The ones I deal with, I've been quite happy with in general. There are some bad apples, but it's mostly they just come there and they start following the form. It's what they should want to do. They should not want to veer off from this form and start their own audits ad lib. When that happens, you're dealing with a bad apple, and that person normally has some kind of other goal that is not in line with just auditing you objectively. Deal with remedial. As the auditor goes through this form, they may pick up items of remedial. So for example, if they were auditing you on this form and they said, okay, proof that a company is a closed corporation, public institution, etc. So they want your proof, your CIPC document. So I've linked it to the QMS. Appendix I is the location in the QMS where that document exists. This is your copy of the evaluation sheet, which you have in your hand and you follow along during the audit, but they will have their own copy. It's best to make sure that they're using the same template, so question 1.1 is the same as your question 1.1. They will have their own one, and they will be marking this form with their own feedback. So the form instructs the auditor to put their remarks in line with evidence, which is mandatory, and provide a narrative of the evidence given. So you are looking at this form as it is now, and your auditor will also be looking at this form, and they will see the CIPC document you just presented to them, and they will say CIPC document is present, whatever their narrative is. Let's give it a different color because they're the auditor, so let's give them that color. Then they will move on to the next questions. 1.2, CIPC shows a list of directors and their ID numbers. Okay, so then you show them their CIPC document, but you only had page 1 of your CIPC, for example, and didn't have page 2. If that was the case, they would say CIPC page 1 is here, but not 2, so we did not see director IDs. You could also just remedy this during the audit and go and find the other page and insert it into your QMS, but let's say for instance that didn't happen. As an example, they would put that there. They would say remedy CIPC page 1 is here but not 2, so we did not see director IDs. And so it goes throughout the entire form, and the auditor follows the form question by question, and each question you answer. by presenting evidence that was part of your QMS. Deal with remedial. Don't ask how did I do. So once they've got to the end of this form, I would recommend that you ask them to summarize the points of remedial that they have written down. It is not appropriate for them to just give this verbally. They should be giving you this in writing. For some reason they won't give you this report, their copy of this report, but they should at least feed back to you in writing. Say for instance, if you couldn't remedy it right there and then, they should feed back to you on an email of the items that are of remedial that are outstanding. For example, if we are running this audit, I would guess you're trying to just fix that on and just go and get page 2 of your CIPC, insert it in and let the audit continue, because that is the direct requirement. Then you would just insert it. If you weren't able to do that, they should send you an email afterwards requesting the items that you did not do that require remedy that are aligned to this form, and then you need to just provide those items. The reason why I say go back over the remedial is if they've been feeding back to you verbally, which is contrary to what their form requires, they need to tick yes or no and then make remarks about the evidence. If they've been feeding back to you verbally, they've not been doing what the form requires, they're not doing what QCTO has asked them to do, so you can ask them to go back over the remedial and mention the points. If they haven't written it down, they'll usually forget it. You should be compliant, but if they're not feeding back to you in writing, then it's likely that they'll forget half of the things that they verbally fed back to you, and then your remedial will decrease. It's just the way the process works. Bear in mind that the audit is not a pass-fail event. I've never seen a person that I've prepped fail an audit. The result of the audit is that they complete a report and send it to the QCTO with their recommendation. If there are points of remedial, they need to feed back to you. Within 5 days, you need to send remedial, and then they will send it on to the QCTO with their recommendation for final approval. I have not seen anyone fail an event, like have an auditor come there and say you fail. I'm not sure how one would do that. Maybe you just have complete disregard for the process, or maybe the auditor would be wrong. I don't know. I couldn't imagine a scenario where a person fails on the spot. I don't know what you would need to do that. Clients I prepared, that has never ever happened. To recap, you start the audit with this form in your hand and ready to go. You welcome them, you get proof that they're there, and when the audit starts, you stay in control of your audit by ensuring that it follows this form. The auditor should want to follow that form because that's their sheet given to them by the QCTO. But if they are veering off that and you're dealing with a bad apple, then you need to stop the audit because it's becoming derailed. Don't allow an audit that is not following this sheet and has become subjective to continue, because if you do allow it to continue, it'll only get worse. I will do the next video on dealing with bad apples, a very short one. Deal with remedial. They need to give you remedial feedback on what your remedial is in writing. Don't ask how I did. It's a subjective question. What you want to know is what are the remedial items, and those remedial items must be aligned to this form, not made up. And then go back over the remedial after the audit, but once the audit is finished, they should be sending your application to QCTO with a recommendation, or they need to give you feedback on what remedial you need to do within those 5 days. So that needs to happen once the audit is finished and the auditor has left. You've done a successful audit, but you need to then return to the follow-up stage, which is part of monitoring. So we'll get back to that.